The CEO's first instinct wasn't fear. It was irritation. She checked her watch as the elevator doors slid open onto the underground parking level, the soft echo of heels clicking against concrete following her like a metronome. It had been a 14-hour day, board meetings, investor calls, a brutal earnings review, and all she wanted was to get her daughter home, tuck her into bed, and forget the world for a few hours. "Mama, can we get ice cream?" 6-year-old Lily asked from the back seat, her voice light and hopeful. "Tomorrow," the CEO replied absently, pressing the unlock button on her key fob. The black SUV blinked awake. "I promise." That was when the shadow moved. At first, it registered as nothing more than motion, someone stepping out from between two parked cars. Then another shape appeared on the other side. Both wore dark hoodies. Both moved too fast. Her stomach dropped. "Lily, stay in the car," she snapped, shoving the door closed before her daughter could even unbuckle. The CEO turned, heart hammering, already reaching for her phone. The taller man raised something metallic. "Keys." "Now," he barked. The world narrowed to a single thought. This is a robbery. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she fumbled with the keys, dropping them once, then scooping them up with shaking fingers. She could feel Lily's eyes on her through the tinted glass, wide and terrified. "Please," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "My child is in the car." "Then move faster," the man snapped. That was when someone else spoke. "Hey." The voice was calm. Too calm. The CEO's head snapped to the left. A man stood a few steps away, hands raised slowly, palms open. He looked ordinary, jeans, worn jacket, tired eyes. Early 30s, maybe. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his fingers through it one too many times. Beside him, gripping his hand, was a little boy about Lily's age. "Dad," the boy whispered. "It's okay, buddy," the man said softly, without looking back. "Just stay right there." The CEO's heart sank. Another parent, she thought. Another child in danger. "Walk away," one of the hooded men growled. "This doesn't concern you." The single dad didn't move. Instead, he took one slow step forward. "It does," he said, "because there are kids here." The shorter robber laughed, sharp and ugly. "You want to be a hero?" "No," the man replied. "I want everyone to go home." The CEO's breath caught. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to back away, to take his child and run. Didn't he see the danger? Didn't he understand what kind of men these were? But something in his posture, steady, grounded, made even the robbers hesitate. "Keys," the taller man snapped again, this time pointing the metal object not at the CEO, but toward the SUV. Lily screamed. The sound sliced through the garage, raw and panicked. Before the CEO could react, the single dad moved. Not fast, not reckless, deliberate. He stepped between the robber and the car, angling his body just enough to block the line of sight. His hands stayed raised, but his shoulders squared, protective instinct written into every inch of him. "Please," he said, voice lower now. "There's a child in that seat. You don't need to point that at her." "Get out of the way," the robber shouted. The man shook his head once. "I can't do that." Time stretched thin, like glass about to shatter. The CEO's mind raced. Security? Cameras? Why isn't anyone coming? Her legs felt rooted to the ground. Every cell in her body screamed to run to her daughter, but the image of that metal object swinging toward the car froze her in place. The single dad glanced back briefly, meeting her eyes. In that fraction of a second, she saw something she didn't expect. Not bravado. Not fear. Resolve. The kind that comes from someone who has already lost something once and refuses to lose again. "Take me instead," he said quietly. The words hit the air like a dropped plate. "What?" the CEO whispered. "Dad," his son cried, tugging on his jacket. The man crouched just enough to squeeze the boy's hand. "Remember what I told you," he said gently. "If anything happens, you stay right here and shout for help. Loud as you can." The robbers exchanged a look. "Are you serious?" the shorter one scoffed. "You think this is a trade?" "I think," the man replied, standing tall again. that you don't want things to get complicated. For the first time since they appeared, the robbers hesitated. And in that hesitation, those 2 fragile seconds, the CEO realized something terrifying and profound. This man didn't know her, didn't know her title, didn't know her wealth. Yet, he was willing to put himself directly in harm's way to protect her child. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The shorter robber cursed under his breath. "Back off," the taller one said, lowering the metal object just a fraction. The CEO clutched her chest, breath coming in shallow gasps as the tension cracked open, just enough to let hope seep in. But she didn't know yet. This moment, this single choice by a stranger, was about to change all of their lives forever. And it was only the beginning. The sirens didn't mean safety yet. They were distant, too distant, and the men in hoodies knew it. The taller one's jaw tightened as he scanned the garage, calculating exits, angles, consequences. Criminals didn't always panic when they heard sirens. Sometimes they rushed. "Police are coming," the shorter robber hissed. "We need to move." The CEO swallowed hard. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stay upright. Lily's cries had quieted into soft, terrified whimpers inside the SUV, each sound twisting like a knife in her chest. "Please," she said again, her voice breaking now. "Just take the car. Take everything. Leave the children." The taller man scoffed. "Lady, this stopped being about the car." Her blood ran cold. The single dad sensed the shift instantly. He widened his stance, subtly placing more of his body between the robber and the SUV. His breathing slowed, controlled, as if he were anchoring himself. "Easy," he said. "Nobody needs to get hurt." "Shut up," the shorter robber snapped, stepping closer. "You're not in charge here." But the single dad didn't back away. Instead, he glanced at the SUV again, at the tiny silhouette of Lily in the back seat. Then he looked at his own son, who stood frozen a few feet behind him, eyes glossy with fear but fixed firmly on his father. "Hey," the dad said softly, without turning around. "Look at me." The boy obeyed instantly. "Whatever happens next," the man continued, "you remember this, okay? Be brave. Just like you are every day." The CEO felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't know this man's story, but she knew courage when she saw it. And she also knew desperation. This wasn't the confidence of someone trained for danger. It was the resolve of someone who refused to let fear decide the outcome. The taller robber lifted the metal object again. Only now, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the CEO realized it wasn't a gun. It was a crowbar. Her chest tightened, but the relief lasted only a heartbeat. A crowbar could still crush a skull, could still shatter glass, could still reach a child through a car window. "Move," the robber barked. The single dad shook his head again. Slower this time. Firmer. "No." The sound echoed through the garage. For a split second, everything hung suspended. The sirens, the fluorescent buzz, the soft sobbing from inside the SUV. The shorter robber lunged forward, adrenaline overtaking caution. The CEO screamed. But the single dad reacted first. He stepped in, not swinging, not striking, just closing the distance, grabbing the crowbar with both hands as it came down. The impact jolted through the garage with a dull clang. Pain shot up his arms, but he didn't let go. "Run," he shouted suddenly. Not to the CEO, but to his son. The boy hesitated for only a fraction of a second before bolting toward the stairwell, sneakers slapping wildly against the concrete. "Get him," the shorter robber yelled. The taller one yanked the crowbar back, tearing it free from the single dad's grip. The motion threw the man off balance. He hit the ground hard, the air knocked clean out of his lungs. The CEO's legs finally unlocked. She ran to the SUV, hands shaking so badly she could barely open the door. Lily launched herself into her arms, sobbing, burying her face into her mother's suit jacket. "It's okay," the CEO whispered frantically. "I've got you. I've got you." But her eyes never left the man on the ground. The taller robber raised the crowbar again. "Stop," the CEO screamed, turning back instinctively. The robber hesitated, not because of her, but because the sirens were louder now. Much closer. Blue and red light flickered faintly across the concrete walls. "Let's go," the shorter man shouted. They ran. Footsteps pounded toward the exit, disappearing into the night just as security guards burst into the garage, followed seconds later by police officers with weapons drawn. "Police. Hands where we can see them." The CEO dropped to her knees, clutching Lily as the reality of it all crashed over her. Her body shook uncontrollably, shock finally claiming its due. An officer rushed to her side. "Ma'am, are you injured?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Another officer knelt beside the single dad, who was sitting up now, wincing as he rubbed his forearm. "Sir, stay still," the officer said. "We need to check you out." "I'm fine," the man said through clenched teeth. "My son, did he?" "He's safe," another officer called out. "Found him in the stairwell." The single dad exhaled sharply, relief washing over his face so powerfully it made his eyes close for a moment. The CEO watched him, heart pounding. That relief, that collapse of tension, told her everything. This man hadn't been trying to impress anyone. He hadn't been chasing heroics. He'd been surviving. An EMT approached, shining a light over his arm. "You're lucky," she said. "A few inches higher, and that could have been bad." The man nodded. "Yeah, lucky." The CEO stood slowly, Lily still clinging to her. She walked toward him, heels echoing softly in the now crowded garage. "Sir," she said, her voice unsteady. I don't know how to thank you." He looked up at her, surprised, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "You don't need to," he said simply. "That's what parents do." The words hit her harder than anything else that night, because in that moment, she realized something that would haunt her long after the police reports were filed. If that man hadn't stepped forward, if he hadn't said no, her daughter might not be alive. And she didn't even know his name. The garage emptied faster than the fear did. Police cars rolled out one by one. Security guards returned to their posts. The echo of chaos faded, leaving behind a hollow quiet that felt almost unreal, like waking up after a nightmare and needing a few seconds to remember where you are. The CEO sat in the back of her SUV, Lily curled against her chest, exhausted tears soaking into her blouse. An EMT had insisted they stay a few minutes longer, just to be sure. Lily's breathing was slow now, uneven but steady. "You did great, sweetheart," the CEO whispered, brushing hair from her daughter's damp forehead. Lily didn't answer. She was already half asleep. Through the windshield, the CEO watched the single dad. He stood near a concrete pillar, his jacket folded over one arm, a small bandage wrapped tightly around his forearm. His son hovered close, fingers threaded through his father's like a lifeline, refusing to let go. They looked ordinary again. No drama, no spotlight. Just a father and his child waiting patiently while officers finished paperwork. Something inside the CEO twisted. "Ma'am," an officer said softly from outside the window, "we're all set. You're free to go." She nodded, then hesitated. "Actually," she said, unbuckling Lily carefully, "could you give me one more minute?" The officer glanced at the sleeping child, then nodded. "Of course." The CEO stepped out of the SUV, smoothing her rumpled suit. Her heels felt wrong now, too sharp, too loud in the aftermath of something that had stripped everything down to instinct and survival. She walked toward the man. "Excuse me," she said gently. He turned, instinctively shifting his body, so he was slightly in front of his son again. Even now. "Yes," he replied. "My name is—" She stopped herself. Titles suddenly felt ridiculous. "I just wanted to say, thank you. Properly." He gave a small nod. "You already did." "No," she said quietly. "I really didn't." His son looked up at her, curiosity edging out fear now. "You saved my daughter," the CEO continued. "I don't think you understand what that means to me." The man studied her for a moment, then shrugged slightly. "I didn't do anything special." She almost laughed. "Almost. You stood between a weapon and a child," she said. "Most people would have frozen." "I didn't have time to think," he replied. "Thinking makes it harder." That answer stayed with her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ethan," he said after a pause. "This is Noah." Noah gave a shy half-wave. She hesitated again, then decided it didn't matter. "I'm Lily's mom." Ethan smiled faintly at that. "She's brave." The CEO's throat tightened. "So is your son." Ethan looked down at Noah, squeezing his hand. "Yeah. He had to grow up a little faster than I wanted." There it was, the weight beneath the calm. They stood in silence for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Can I at least give you my card?" the CEO asked, reaching into her purse. "In case you need anything, or in case I can help." Ethan stiffened almost imperceptibly. "That's not why I stepped in," he said carefully. "I know," she replied quickly. "And I'm not trying to turn it into that. She searched for the right words. "People disappear after moments like this. I don't want you to feel like that." He studied her face, searching for something. Pity, obligation, strings. Finding none, he nodded once. "All right." She handed him the card. He glanced at it and froze. The CEO noticed the change immediately. His eyes flicked from the name to her face, then back again. "You're that CEO," he said slowly. She winced. "I was hoping tonight I could just be a mom." Ethan exhaled, a quiet huff of disbelief. "Figures." "What does?" "Nothing," he said, tucking the card into his pocket. "Just explains the car." She almost smiled. Before she could say anything else, Noah tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, can we go home now?" Ethan crouched down, wincing slightly as he bent. "Yeah, buddy. We're done here." The CEO felt a sudden urgency she didn't expect. "Wait," she said. Do you have a way home?" He nodded. "Bus stop's 2 blocks that way." Her heart sank. Not because he took the bus, but because she suddenly understood how thin the margin was between his courage and his circumstances. "It's late," she said carefully. "And after tonight, would you let me drive you?" Ethan hesitated. Pride flashed across his face, sharp and reflexive. But then he looked at Noah, looked at the dark street beyond the garage. "All right," he said finally, "but just the ride." The SUV felt different with them inside it. Noah sat beside Lily, who had woken just enough to blink at him sleepily. "Hi," Lily murmured. "Hi," Noah replied. The CEO watched them in the rear-view mirror, something loosening in her chest. "Where to?" she asked. Ethan gave her an address. It wasn't far, but it wasn't the kind of neighborhood she drove through often. When they arrived, the CEO noticed the peeling paint, the dim porch light, the narrow steps. She parked and turned to him. "Ethan," she said, "about tonight." He opened the door. "We're good." "No," she said, firmer now. "We're not. Because you saved my daughter, and tomorrow you'll wake up and go back to your life like nothing happened." He paused. "That's usually how it works," he said quietly. The CEO watched him step out, lift Noah into his arms, and walk toward the building. For the first time in years, success didn't feel like protection. It felt like responsibility. And as she drove away, one thought burned brighter than the rest. She wasn't done with him yet. The CEO didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crowbar swing, heard Lily scream, felt the crushing certainty that she had been seconds away from losing everything that mattered. At 4:12 a.m., she gave up and sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Across the room, Lily slept curled on her side, one small hand tucked beneath her cheek. Safe, breathing, alive. And alive because of a man who would wake up in a few hours, pack his son's lunch, and catch a bus to a job that probably didn't pay enough, never expecting to hear from her again. The thought made her chest ache. She opened her laptop. Not the corporate dashboard. Not earnings projections. Something else. She typed his name into a blank document. Ethan Walker. She stared at it for a moment, then added a single line beneath it. Saved my daughter's life. At 6:30 a.m., Lily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas. "Mommy," she asked softly, "did the bad men go away for good?" The CEO closed the laptop and pulled her into her lap. Yes, sweetheart. They're gone. Did the nice dad get hurt? The question hit harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He's okay, she said gently. Thanks to him, so are we. Lily nodded solemnly. He was really brave. Yes, the CEO whispered. He was. By 8 a.m., she was in her office, but nothing felt the same. Her assistant rattled off the day's agenda. Investor lunch. Legal call. Media appearance. Cancel the lunch, the CEO said without looking up. Her assistant blinked. That meeting took 3 weeks to schedule. I know, she replied. Reschedule it. What about the media? Cancel. The assistant hesitated. Is everything okay? The CEO finally looked up. No. But it will be. An hour later, she sat across from her head of security. I want everything, she said. Police report. Witness statements. CCTV. And I want to know where Ethan Walker works. The man raised an eyebrow. For what purpose? She didn't answer right away. Because, she said finally, he did something extraordinary. And extraordinary things shouldn't vanish into the cracks. By noon, she had a file. Ethan Walker, 34. Widowed. 1 child. Maintenance technician at a manufacturing plant across town. No criminal record. No debts that screamed recklessness. Just the quiet, suffocating kind. Medical bills. Childcare costs. Rent always paid a few days late. The CEO leaned back in her chair. So that was it. Not a thrill seeker. Not a man with nothing to lose. A man with everything to lose, and who stepped forward anyway. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello. Miss Carter, a man said. Yes. This is Detective Morales. We wanted to let you know we identified the suspects from last night. They're in custody. Relief washed through her. Thank you. There's one more thing, the detective added. Mr. Walker declined to press charges. She closed her eyes. Of course he did. He said he just wants it over, the detective continued. No court. No attention. When the call ended, the CEO sat very still. He didn't want gratitude. Didn't want compensation. Didn't want recognition. But that didn't mean he didn't deserve it. At 3 p.m., she stood in the parking lot of Ethan's workplace. The building was gray and forgettable, the kind you passed every day without noticing. Workers streamed out at shift change, lunch pails and tired faces blending into the afternoon. Ethan emerged near the back, jacket slung over his shoulder, forearms still stiff. She stepped forward. Ethan. He stopped short, surprise flashing across his face. You didn't have to come, he said after a beat. I know, she replied. But I wanted to. They stood awkwardly for a moment. I'm not here to offer money, she said before he could speak. At least not like that. He crossed his arms slightly protective. Then why are you here? Because, she said carefully, you said last night that you'd go back to your life like nothing happened. And I don't think that's fair. He studied her face, wary but curious. You didn't choose heroics, she continued, but you chose courage. And I run a company that talks a lot about values, while rarely acting on them. Ethan exhaled slowly. I'm not looking for a job, if that's where this is going. She shook her head. No. But I am looking for someone to help me build something. His brow furrowed. There are families in this city one paycheck away from disaster, she said. Single parents. Kids. People who do the right thing quietly. She met his eyes. I want to start a foundation. Not in my name. In yours. Silence stretched between them. That's too much, Ethan said finally. No, she replied. It's not enough. He looked away, struggling. I didn't do what I did to become a symbol, he said. I know, she said softly. That's exactly why it should be you. He didn't answer. But the seed had been planted. And for the first time since the garage, the CEO saw something new in his expression. Not fear. Hope. Even if he didn't know it yet. The first call came 3 days later. Ethan stared at his phone as it buzzed on the kitchen counter, Noah coloring quietly beside him. The name on the screen made his stomach tighten. He almost didn't answer. Almost. "Hello." "Ethan," the CEO said. Her voice was calm, but warm, different from the controlled tone he remembered from television interviews. "I promise I won't take much of your time." He glanced at Noah. "I've got a few minutes." "That's all I need," she replied. "I wanted to tell you something before you hear it anywhere else." "Hear what?" She took a breath. "I filed the paperwork this morning. The foundation is official." Silence filled the small apartment. "You didn't wait," Ethan said finally. "I didn't want to give myself time to talk myself out of it." He rubbed his forehead. "I told you, I'm not comfortable being the face of." "You won't be," she interrupted gently. "Not unless you choose to be. This isn't about headlines. It's about action." He didn't respond. "Ethan," she continued, "do you know how many single parents turned down help last year because they didn't want charity?" He shook his head, though she couldn't see it.
"No. Thousands," she said.
"But they'll accept support if it's framed as respect, as recognition, as you did something right and the world noticed." Noah looked up at his father. "Who is it?" Ethan covered the phone slightly. "Someone who wants to help people." Noah smiled. "That's nice." The CEO heard the exchange and smiled on her end too. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," she said. "I'm asking you to make sure what you did that night keeps happening, even when you're not there." Ethan closed his eyes. He saw the garage again, saw Lily's terrified face, heard his own voice saying, "Take me instead." "All right," he said quietly. "I'll listen." The first grant went out a week later. Then another. Emergency childcare, rent assistance, medical bills quietly erased before they became crises. No press releases. No cameras. Just relief. Ethan sat in meetings after work, still in his worn jacket, asking simple questions no one else thought to ask. Will this embarrass them? Can we make it automatic so they don't have to beg? What happens after the check clears? The CEO watched him from across the table one evening and realized something startling. He wasn't learning philanthropy. He was teaching it. One night, months later, the CEO stood in her living room watching Lily rehearse for her school recital. Lily stumbled on a note, giggled, and tried again. From the couch, Noah clapped enthusiastically. "You're getting better," he said. Lily beamed. Ethan laughed softly. "Careful, she'll start charging for concerts." The CEO smiled, leaning against the doorway. Life had rearranged itself in quiet ways. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Just purposefully. After the recital, Lily crawled into her mother's lap. "Mommy," she asked, "do you remember the scary night?" The CEO nodded. "I do." "Is that why we help people now?" The question stopped her cold. "Yes," she said slowly. "That's exactly why." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Good." Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch and Ethan carried him home, the CEO stood alone in her kitchen. She thought about who she'd been before the garage. Efficient, powerful, untouchable. And who she was now. Grateful. She sent Ethan a message. "Thank you for reminding me what matters." He replied a few minutes later. "Thank you for making sure it didn't end in that garage." A year later, the foundation quietly crossed its first milestone. 1,000 families helped. At the small internal celebration, there were no speeches. No banners. Just a simple plaque mounted on the wall. It read, "Courage isn't loud. It just steps forward." Ethan stood beside it, Noah holding his hand. The CEO stood beside Lily. No titles. No hierarchy. Just parents. Just children. Just one choice that refused to disappear. And somewhere in a dim parking garage across the city, fluorescent lights hummed on and off, unaware that one ordinary night, one ordinary man, had turned fear into a future. Because sometimes the thing that saves a child ends up saving everyone.